Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Welcome back to the show. We are joined by our professional of the year, Dr. Grant Venerable, joining us today live from beautiful, sunny California. And we're here with blizzard-prone 2026 in New York. How are you?
Right. I'm fine.
Great. Well, excited to see you here. What do we have in store for those new timers out there, Grant? There's a lot to be said about you, your memoirs, but your life's work. How did you want to start off for today?
Well, I want to start by saying I'm going to talk about chaos today. And that's why I wrote the book. I didn't know that's why until after I wrote it. And the book is, let's see, Footprints in the Chaotic Unknown.
Ooh.
And so that's what I'm dealing with. I'm looking at the theme out of my fourth volume of these ebooks. Well, volume 4 at the very end starts with a great experience I had in San Luis Obispo, California, back in 2016. I spent the whole academic year at Cal Poly State University teaching introductory chemistry. And it was a wonderful time because I was well past retirement and I wanted to know what life was like where I taught first at the college level back in 1972. And I learned, and it really dovetails a lot with what people are talking about today.
Yeah.
And let me get to something I'm looking at online here. Now, can you still hear me?
I still see you. I hear you, see you. Yeah.
Okay. And you can see me.
Yep.
But
perfect.
now I'm going to go onto a document that I'm looking at here until I get back to my screen here. But there it is. And this is going to get pretty wild and crazy and fun right at the start here.
Yeah, of course.
And I'm introducing dealing with chaos with a commentary on what education really needs to be about.
Yeah.
And so I'm starting with what I call an inheritance of values.
Okay.
That my cultural heritage in one of the 3 of the HBCUs, that is the historically Black colleges, that provided my employment, gave me a heads up on something that I needed to write my memoir. Let's see. I inherited from great-grandparents whose unique footprints revealed pathways leading them away from the plantation and its fragmentally restraining mindsets. But providentially, that is where the grand synthesis of my life and my learning had to occur. In accord with something I call the definition of the whole, the WHOLE, whole, in which 2 metaphorical entities symbolized by Adam and Eve that do not always comfortably exist together had to learn to coexist harmoniously to achieve a superior result never imagined possible. And that is the subject of dualism. And I'm approaching it in a little different way. So to achieve this comfortable coexistence, however, meant that the pre-individuated, pre-conscious Adam and Eve, entirely dependent on the Creator for their essential needs, yet tempted by Satan. And Satan is the 1st century BC, or no, AD, metaphysical symbol for separation from the Creator. had to depart idealized, illusory Eden. That's what Adam and Eve had to do.
Yeah.
It was all a beautiful illusion. This, of course, was an Eden founded in simplistic understandings in the form of either or, spiritual versus material,
Mm-hmm.
good versus evil, black versus white, false knowledge. It came to pass that a new higher level synthesis of mortal stewardship of the planet, as well as a self aware recognition of a both and unselfishly we reality was to be recognized. By
Yeah.
that I mean, we, all us human we's on this planet, are in it together, whether we like it or not,
Yeah.
or know it or not. And this led to mortals finally reflecting the
Wow.
potential for becoming mature,
Mm-hmm.
individuated, complementary entities comprised of a unified, congruent, dualistic self.
Wow.
And that's an idea that comes from Elaine Packles, who wrote some of the first books derived from the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Mm-hmm.
Going forward, symbolic Adam and Eve
Wow.
were granted the privilege of procreating offspring
Yeah.
and establishing home, family, and 2 o'clock in the morning bottle feedings, and
Uh-huh.
future progeny possessing all the joys and travails of earthly existence. I had to perform my own personal grand synthesis of God as third eye vision, a thoroughly congruent vision of the atoms of both my material being and also the atom content of the university's steel, bricks, and mortar, mechanical, and electronic infrastructure. And that's what the big fight is about today, the big debate. What are we going to do, alas, with education?
Yeah.
Well, it depends on what you're doing politically. And if you're a candidate or already in office, you want to give campaign speeches about education and take advantage of whatever are its flaws, failings, or goodness, potentials, good parts. The synthesis, at least, had to begin to guide the academic culture that is this argument today about education. That academic culture has to come into the rhythm and flow of a new eternal dance of life. That is when my calling turned into destiny, teaching in the university. It is not always a comforting or stress free thing, but it is the only meaningful outcome for the complementary whole in any given eternal now. It may take time to see that mortal existence does not get better than that. It doesn't get better than that because we're not in a perfect world, but we can move toward it. Now, that led me to finding answers to tough questions in education and
Yeah.
life. Irrespective of anyone's perception of my socioeconomic class, age, race, or skin coloration as the Black Yankee outsider from California. The historically Black college university culture often viewed me as bringing weirdly divergent ideas to teaching. These were ideas about lifting
Mm-hmm.
up attitudes of academic excellence and achievement. In defiance of the odds, I found my calling there. It wasn't easy, as supportive academic colleagues learned. The complementary
Yeah.
art of coexisting with the unifying energy field of my ideas
Yeah.
that many eventually transcended
Mm-hmm.
their and fixed limiting beliefs about life. And they did what had to be done
Yep.
to achieve a new learning and managing approach. Well, that's not what's happening in the debate in Washington, D.C., in the Department of Education about woe be us, our
Mm-hmm.
education, our post secondary education in
Yeah.
college and graduate school just isn't perfect. It's not perfect enough. And I'm saying, okay, so what? Well, what are we going to do about it rather than
Yeah.
wring our hands and say how terrible the
Yeah.
universities are? They're so expensive. There's no return on investment, and we can't get jobs even with a bachelor's degree. So, all that's going on is utter chaotic
Yeah.
paradox. Now, I didn't quite know I'd get into all that. However, where it's bringing me is to 2016 when I asked the dean of science and mathematics at Cal Poly, whom I got to know well when we were fellow teachers there in the 1970s.
Mm-hmm.
And he respected me enough to say, sure, Grant, well, let's see what we can do. And he made a strategy for how to get me back there. What that helped me to put together in dealing with the questions of what we need to do about education. Perhaps the most difficult has been how, irrespective of gender, ethnocultural identity, or socioeconomic background, do you get youngsters to excel at mathematics, science, and any other challenging subject of enduring worth?
Mm-hmm.
The short answer is the only real answer. You treat all with an equal respect, and you
Yeah.
expect each learner to be responsible for their own health and their own learning,
Mm-hmm.
and to ask good, meaningful questions in the classroom and office hours with the professor, and to collaborate with classmates outside of class. Here comes the whole idea of tough love, which requires telling them that you expect nothing less than their own best performance. No excuses accepted or reasons why not. And following in the ancestral footsteps of my forebears, you provide an environment of
Yeah.
caring.
Yeah.
You focus on diverse knowledge, resources, and teaching techniques that offer inspiration, quality mentoring time, and self
Yeah.
discipline. Most of all, you make sure your learners feel your mentor's love in your respect and encouragement for them. So such answers go direct to my Kansas, Missouri, Kentucky, Scott, Venerable ancestors. Take no prisoners approach to life, going
Mm-hmm.
back more than 2 centuries.
Wow.
The ancestors relied upon such strengths to assure their own survival
Mm-hmm.
and to structure their lives
Okay.
free of post traumatic slavery disorder.
Oh.
Beneficiaries of the audacious courage of ancestors like my great 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 grandma Lucy Scott and her daughter
Ah.
Harry Scott White,
Mm-hmm.
Jenny Furman Brassfield, Nancy Davis Payne, or Reverend Robert J. Venable overcame adversity to create patterns of health, success, and lifetime achievement. How my forebears managed frustrating uncertainty amidst chaos is the underlying theme and entire conclusion of my memoir, Footprints in the Chaotic Unknown. And I have to say, my life this morning is pretty chaotic. And that's a temporary reality.
Yeah.
And I know that. I've been around long enough to know it's temporary. So I don't have to get panicked or fly off at the handle. When I began teaching chemistry in 1971 to boom generation youngsters, that's the boom generation. These are the parents and grandparents of the youngsters I was teaching in 2016 at Cal Poly. But I taught these boom generation youngsters a liberal arts general education approach that extends learning in one subject to all others. It provided them opportunity to master such universal human conditions as uncertainty and frustration. In other words, it mattered not if they found a job in their major field, as they would be prepared for any opportunity or eventuality. And hardly anybody's talking about that. All Congress can talk about and the White House can talk about is, oh, it's the university giving them a major that they can go to work immediately after they graduate and make enough money to live the American dream. And as great as that would be, it's not going to work that way. My 1970s boomer youngsters took this approach to heart and ran with it. On my 2016-2017 return to Cal Poly, ground zero of my full-time college teaching, my students had morphed into millennial freshmen, most of whom expected an expedient, right now teaching method yielding a diploma and a job on a date certain. Are you with me, Jill? And listeners, are you with me? Please be with me. Many saw no need, hear this, many saw no need to waste time being equipped for an uncertain, chaotic future beyond 2020, which, when viewed from 2016, presented the tempting expectation of perfect certainty, a mental conception free of pandemics like COVID-19, or job market collapse, or the onset of AI, artificial intelligence, or the visual is sometimes baffling Me Too and Black Lives Matter activism. Who knew? Nobody. And that's my whole interest in discussing the ultimate purpose of higher education. And that's not being done enough across this great land. It's being done by the really wise people. They're doing it, and there's solid, wonderful examples of how it's working. But all the Washington people, the congressmen, and the White House people are just wringing their hands and saying, oh, it's not working. It's all collapsing. There's no return on investment. There's this percentage and that percentage. But as novelists tell of their written texts, my writing took a life of its own as the text itself began dictating to me what to include and when and how to include it. The result is far from that of a logical plan, but one that blends history, experiences of this author, his kin and ancestors, and his psychological dream material with cameo appearances by key topics in chemistry, physics, and mathematics. My memoir's content seemed channeled from far outside myself, pointing to my evolving perspective of chaotic reality. I came to see that most academic and political leaders and media people still reside in an outdated universe, abandoned long ago as inadequate or untrue by the advanced scientific thinkers of the modern age. And that gets us into what physicists recognize as dark energy, dark matter, what causes it, the old causality and certitude of Newton's laws, and what passes for most of behavioral science and economics may still appear to be true, but only in a more limited sense than most scholars think, or most politicians think.
Mm-hmm.
Education, religion, technology, politics, the information media, and our personal everyday lives are in a state of predictable, even breathtaking collapse.
Mm-hmm.
However, as a society, we have yet to catch up with incorporating the basics of quantum physics, relativity, and depth psychology, and how the nation educates versus restricting its
Mm-hmm.
citizens with lockstep teaching methodologies.
Wow.
Form of mass insanity took control of the European mind after Galileo discovered multiple moons revolving about Jupiter, thus demolishing the divine historic belief that the earth and earth's God was the center of everything. More to the point, the question arose, was there even a God? Small wonder that the Roman Catholic Church placed Galileo under house arrest for disturbing the peace of mind of the European world and its fixed, fragmental beliefs. In like manner, COVID-19 not only unleashed stressful illness and death, but also an unanticipated global insanity evidenced in extreme episodes of road rage, other rages, skyrocketing incidents of killings by handguns and assault rifles,
Mm-hmm.
neglect of the homeless, anything goes corporate and political corruption, the Ukraine, Sudanese, and other wars, a one party dismantling of voting rights on the pretext of citizen distrust of the world's oldest electoral system, and the dramatic rise in antisocial behavior on social media platforms and in religion, sports, entertainment, and schools. Then it gets back to my revisit as a teacher to Cal Poly, in which I found new realities, new diversions. As human perception rises to the level of seeing a whole and well connected reality, and as we continue to observe with below the surface mindfulness, we can see that politics, as usual, has already shifted to disclose new realities for peace, unity, and prosperity. And we can also see those political forces working hard to prevent that from happening so they can win elections. But in an era of unhinged digital complexities and lethal microbes, these new realities get hidden in plain sight under the tweeted insanities of today's elected officials and talking heads. But jumping back to Cal Poly 2016, that was really demonstrative. It was illustrative. It was a real surprise for me because the group I was teaching were scheduled to graduate in 2020. And of course, what was happening in 2020? Schools were shutting down, industry was shutting down because of this terrible coronavirus that nobody predicted except some very intelligent
Yeah.
biologists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But anyway, I have no further need of all of the fears that have come up today. But my experience in that classroom really did it. It brought it all together. When I realized the students I was facing who were like 50 years younger than the students I originally taught were the results of all of our media culture, our political culture, and how I could undo that in just like quarter teaching at Cal Poly. But I certainly made the effort and I had some good results with it, in which students learn they cannot rely on traditional expectations. The Now our task is far beyond just preparing students for where we already were in normal 2018, 2019 COVID pandemic times, beyond preparing them for a career or for healing a world appearing to fracture along socioeconomic and political fault lines. So that was interesting at Cal Poly in 2016, 2017. What it led to is the role of language, how they communicate with each other. How do teachers communicate with students? And that's the basis of the notes that I've written up for this conversation we're having. How's our time right now, Jill?
We are good. We got 33. I got to do the math here. 27 minutes. Is that it? 27 minutes. Yeah, I'm trying to do the math.
Okay, that's good time because I get to talk about, let's see, there's another little snippet I wanted to get to, and I have to see if I can locate it here. No, let's see. Sure. No, I think we're just going to jump right into discussing the value of my just talking about some pretty abstract topics. And now to put out something I just read from our United States Department of Education. And I realized it was a jumble. It was like a garbage dump of words and data and percentages. And I'm saying, where is this woman going with all of this? She's certainly criticizing the schools, but what is her point? And it's just a lot, it's just a brain dump. And I'm realizing the value over the history of humankind over the last 200,000 years. When language developed, spoken language developed, schools developed, but not until 2,000 years ago when what we would recognize as schools now, all that developed. But what has underdeveloped, I think directly as a result of our technology, our electronic digital technology that encourages people to take shortcuts in talking. So people don't, even in college, master the art of talking together. Let's talk about it. Let's converse. Let's have a dialogue rather than talking past one another. That's how politicians win elections, is they put out words and that they think is going to grab people. These are what we call, what do they call them? Things that really get someone hooked. Buzzwords. They get them hooked. Oh, that candidate talks like what I think. Well, that's what the candidate wants them to think. Meanwhile, the candidate is the politician, the office holders, putting out a whole lot of garbage. It doesn't really mean anything. But that talks about a confusion between two words, the Washington establishment, particularly in the education department, the White House, the executive branch, puts out things without defining them. And that is what's killing us now. That's what allows chaos to really get going. So here's an exercise for our listeners.
Mm-hmm.
Go through some of these network information tweet feeds where people are tweeting whatever they're doing and apply what we call critical thinking, which means that our readers, our listeners, our viewers need to ask good questions. What I mentioned early on in this broadcast. A good question means saying, "Stop. What do you mean by that? Explain it." That needs, well, of course, you're talking to a television or a computer screen, but that's for your own information to get further information about what in the heck are they talking about? There's been no definition. I mean, we use words that everyone thinks they understand, and we've gotten into some of them in the last few podcasts. And some of those words are race, diversity, inclusion, equity. And so one political group says, those are bad words. Just like we tell children, you shouldn't use bad words, children. Those are bad words. They're messing up our whole system when we start talking about we need to be diverse. Well, if we're not diverse, we're going to die off. Because if we plant crops out here in California's great Central Valley, and if those crops are grown from biogenetically developed seeds, so all of the seeds have the same genomic structure. If a disease comes in and wipes out that crop, it's wiped out the seeds, and we're dead in the water as far as having food for ourselves. That's why the agriculturalists tell us we need biodiversity. So the political word diversity actually is a derivative of biodiversity. Humans exclude diversity of culture. Culture is what brings in different ideas and ways of solving problems. And if we had not had the diverse immigrants coming in from different nations and parts of the world, we wouldn't have America today. And most Americans are sensitive enough to, they're sensible enough to know that. Because they also know where I'm from Sweden. That's where my ancestors come from. And or I'm from France, or I'm from the UK, I'm from Italy, I'm from North Africa, I'm from South Africa, I'm from South America, all those places. And here is the US Secretary of Education calling diversity a bad deal and trying to shut down great universities for trying to be more diverse, particularly in their ideas, how they do research, solve America's problems. Now, you can see that that really gets me excited because I understand the spiritual roots of diversity, equity, inclusion. If you don't include everybody, in your building of your society, you're dead in the water, even before you get started. And we're far from dead in the water. But there's a lot of politicians making plans that will do exactly that. And what I see is people are getting smart enough to look right through all of that kind of stuff. Did you want to make a little announcement about the telephone number?
Of course. The lines are open 631 307 4010. That's
And
631
where to call
307
in?
4010. They are open. Any question off, nothing off limits. 631 307 4010. Yep. Lines are always open. Give us a call, everyone. We are here listening, waiting for you to chat with our friend. Thank you. Maybe the snowstorm got people afraid.
Well, the lines are open. I think a couple of times back in our podcast, I used the idea of a form. You could see a sheet of paper and a paper. If it were invisible, we could call that a form. And there'd be different forms, different sheets of paper. And those forms contain the theme idea of something. And when we get forms that don't change, we get rigid in our forms. And overuse of forms is called formality or formalism. And so there's certain things we want to be formal about, like when you go to your place of worship, there's certain formal approaches that you're expected to adhere to. Of course, in technology, science, agriculture, you have to keep recycling your forms so you don't get rigidly stuck in a way of thinking, which is formulaic thinking. Notice my play on words, the one word, form. It has all these derivatives to it. But that's the basis of how I've always taught, is I land on one fundamental theme and I keep diversifying it to meanings in other fields. So, and that's why I would start my chemistry classes with a poem. Sometimes they're famous poems, sometimes they're not famous poems, but it expresses the theme. Edna Vitt had a poem called Pocket Full of Seeds. And I would read from that to start the class. A seed. And she talks about the importance of a seed, what seeds do with our culture, our society. But that's to get the students thinking about pocketfuls of seeds and how that's played a role in their life. So, okay, folks, the homework for next time is to bring in a list of 5 seeds in your life experience, 5 seeds in the history of your family, and what is their importance? And then finally, what is their connection to the chemical elements, the molecules that the atoms of the elements can synthesize? So that's what professors need to be talking about more, so that that specialized major doesn't get stale, and that you enrich it with knowledge and what we call general education from other fields of study. That's what helps a student to integrate all the subject fields together so that they can solve problems. They may not get a job in their major field. Chances are they won't. But that's not all bad. It means their minds are educated enough to be capable to move in any direction that comes up. That's where I am this Monday, looking at some things that I didn't expect. Friday, that my car transmission needs some work. So it needs to be delivered to a transmission place. So I have to go through, out here in the desert, a series of questions to ask myself, okay, what's step 1? What's step 2 to get this thing fixed? And I did that just before the show. So I know how I'm going to get that done. Next, you come up with, well, where's the money coming from to pay for that? Okay. All right, I'll handle that. But I keep my mind open rather than closing up around something called fear. Oh my goodness, where's the money coming from? I keep my mind open. I may have to talk to friends about it, and answers begin to come forward. So the thing I was going to really drive home on language is that we have to watch our language. In when I was growing up, if you were saying words that were off color, as my parents would put it, and my mother would say, now you watch your language, young man. Young lady, watch your language. Or I don't want you associating with those kids up the street because their language is bad language. I'm so glad my parents were like that because it went into other facets of language, and namely that subconscious language we use, our brain uses to talk to itself, particularly to solve challenges. And if it has absorbed the wrong words or the wrong language, or if it absorbs restrictive words, we can't reach those solutions that we need. Another thing that comes up in terms of language is something that Carolyn Mace talks about in her uh, work, her thinking about chakras, human chakras, the 7 chakras from the down at the base and the pelvic region all the way through the gonadal, the solar plexus around the navel, the heart, the throat, the third eye, and then the cosmic hole in the skull, right at the top of the skull. And that's what Mace really helps in her books people to understand the role of the chakras earlier, because it's in the introduction of my book. It's the chapter is called Introduction to the Chakras. And the chakras organize a way of thinking about whatever issues we have coming up. So fear is a funny thing, and yet it can be a deadly thing. And we can deal with fears much better by the right choice of words, phrases, sentences. So before I sleep at night, I just start utilizing these words, and I say I embrace these words. I meditate on the words like words of love. And without love, there's no life. Without life, a living body, we produce no light. The light that lights the world with knowledge and wisdom. Without those things, we have no inner peace. Without inner peace, it's hard to empower ourselves to deal with what we need. And without that, it's hard to get, without that power, it's hard to get to the beauty of existence, and as well as to the joy of existence. With joy comes health. And I'm realizing more and more how those things have propelled me into a much older age than I even thought about when I was a young man. Because when I was 30, 65, retirement looked like it was forever. Well, that'll never come. I mean, I didn't say never. I said it's too far ahead to really think about. So enjoy the present.
Mm-hmm.
But as I began to assemble the pieces of a healthy present with healthy thoughts, healthy ideas of the heart, I could not get to an older age of health. So even the little health quirks I had when I moved here to the desert, just because it was such a difficult effort carrying boxes, packing things into the car, the truck. And it was a little nothing that hasn't happened before.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, without even getting the treatments that I thought that going to my neurologist would help with, my body's already healing. I said, fancy that. But it's what I expected. And expectation is a big part of that, because I speak what I expect. to my mind, and my mind follows suit and manifests it in my living reality.
Yeah.
That was certainly true in school, in UCLA, in college. Wow, that was a tough school. I mean, I had to work hard. I had to work with classmates in chemistry to fully grasp the concepts that we were being taught in the classroom, because those faculty members were the best of their generation coming through college. Certain of my professors were saying, okay, you're a junior now, and you need to start thinking about graduate school. I wasn't even thinking about graduate school when I started college,
I
but some
know.
of my classmates were. And our conversations would push us all. That's called peer pressure
Oh,
of the
yeah.
highest kind. And so we would always ask each other, are you still thinking about going to Columbia University or Johns Hopkins or Harvard or MIT or Stanford or Caltech? And no, now I'm thinking of Wisconsin because there's a professor there I want to work with that I want to do my PhD with. Those are the things that never come up in the Congress and the committees. They're always talking about it comes down to dollars and cents. You've got to go to a school that gives you dollars and cents wise the job that's going to pay you the most money. My ancestors never would have said that. They would have said, you better find you something that's going to give you some peace of mind and happiness in your life, as well as health. Well, yes, those are the most things that you want to have happen. Then get a job that you enjoy. Then get a house that you enjoy. So graduate school was a whole step up from college at UCLA. And as I've said before, the U Chicago, they don't mess around there. But you have to also be broad enough and integrate all of your learning. Because in chemistry, you have to take courses in other sciences of your choice. So I took courses, advanced courses in algebra, abstract algebra, which was the way that I found I learned that you could work equations in calculus that would give you the structural properties of molecules and atoms. But they also wanted you to go look at some other courses on the campus, like social sciences, humanities, and whatever time you had, go there, or music or art. So that's the whole synthesis of education that I'm encouraging the professoriate to reach. And it's what I know that our educators were working hard to do in the 1800s and even before that. And Oxford and Cambridge universities in England, the UK, they were the first in the English speaking world. Then the universities over in Europe, in France and Italy and Scandinavia, all those great universities. So, in a way, we're going back to that, but we're going back in a higher level of that and doing that, talking more about integrating psychology with engineering. Can you imagine that? But that's what they were doing at Caltech in the 1920s and 30s with the wisdom of the professors of engineering. They were able to use their minds in solving social problems, but they were widely read.
Yeah.
They read a lot. You didn't have to take a course in psychology to understand Sigmund Freud or Carl Jung. You could read a good book. They wrote books, and that's what I did. Now we had a saying, and you've heard it, but your parents would want to teach you certain things like the birds and the bees and sex education. We don't want you learning that on the streets. So I'm going to make sure you get it right the way we want you to get it here at home. And that's still good advice. It's good advice for in the other fields of study, mathematics. So I learned psychology from a few good books, but I also learned it even more from a few good friends who were
Yeah.
psychologists, still are psychologists, and spreading their news of living life better. Well, with all that, I'm starting to
Well, okay.
breathe again, but I think that I've made my point, and the point is that we need a much expanded conversation, a much expanded vocabulary in order to hammer out national policy of well-being for the citizens, statewide policy. When California doesn't get the federal policies it wants, it sets its own policies. That's why it's so much ahead in environmental
Yeah.
caretaking. And it causes heart palpitations to certain politicians who don't want that because they have donors to their campaigns that don't care if the environment stays bad or the water stays bad because that person will keep contributing to their campaigns.
Yeah.
But as I said, California, sometimes it's the butt of jokes, but it's no joke out here. And that's what Carolyn Mace talks about in her doctrine, and what the critics of education is. They say we don't want teachers indoctrinating the youngsters with their own political views, but they don't add that. They just say we don't want them indoctrinated. But doctrine is exactly what you want. And what I'm talking about is Grant's doctrine. That's how I indoctrinate. Doctrine comes from the Greek word doctor. I am Dr. Venerable because I have a doctrine, which is a teaching, a way I look at the universe. And I intend to indoctrinate my students. I respect them so well. I want them indoctrinated in how I view the universe, how it has succeeded so well for me to understand the laws of nature. So I went to a whole lot of different places, kind of as it were, wandering around the mental universe to land where we are. And that it's not all about going to college to get a high paying job. That's the least of it. And when I entered college, I wasn't even thinking about a job. And that wasn't a bad thing. I was thinking about what excites me in the life of the mind that I'm learning that I didn't know before. And I can actually use that across in other fields, not just chemistry, but in the social sciences. So where does that put us? Um,
Perfect timing. Perfect. Because we
let's
are,
see.
yeah, with perfect timing. We're out of time. Thank you.
Okay, we're in good shape then.
How do we contact you?
Me.
Can you hear me?
Email address ventwo at aol.com, and uh, website, all lowercase letters, Grant Venerable PhD, no periods.com.
Perfect.
And it may be Grant D Venerable, but whatever you put, Grant or Grant D,
All
the
you got to
the
do
address
is
will correct
Google.
itself.
Exactly. And if you Google him, it's all there. Thank you so much, Grant. Always appreciate you.
That's
And
right. That
sorry
is right.
we got
That's
no
the main
calls today. I
point.
think it was the storm. A lot of people on the Northeast, at least if they're listening today, not a good day with the phone lines. But thank you. We will be in touch. We appreciate you as always. And thank you for being our professional of the year. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with more.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.